Hey traders, welcome back to this week's stock market forecast. We're going to be looking at the global indices as well as the best stocks to buy now in the US stock market and also some of the best stocks to sell now in the US stock market. Okay, so looking at the global indices for portfolio selection, it is the Russell, the SPX, the Dow Jones, and the TSX that sit at the top of my list. The VIX going into next week is still in the negative side of the performance metrics in the hedge dash system. What this means is my bias is to the long side. In other words, I prefer next week to look for long opportunities in some of the stronger stocks. However, we are going to be looking at stocks to the upside and the downside. This is the luxury we have when we're trading stocks as opposed to Forex. Now, in yesterday's weekly Forex forecast video, I highlighted the fact the dollar and the yen were starting to outperform. This tends to be a sign of risk off. So I do think we're going to get risk off coming into markets, but until the VIX starts to bottom, or in other words, starts to trough and reverse higher in the hedge dash performance metrics, I do favor a bullish bias in equities, again, primarily looking for long opportunities in the stronger stocks next week. So if we have a look down at the indices themselves, what jumps out to the long side is, of course, the US indices with the Canadian one, but also we can look in today's video, we'll have a look at the NASDAQ. Now, the NASDAQ is lower down, as you can see, than the Dow Jones, the SPX, the Russell. What does this mean? It means that we're seeing funds coming out of the NASDAQ and they're going into the Russell, into small caps primarily, followed by the S&P, the Dow Jones. And we've seen the markets actually getting quite volatile. The Russell sold off quite hard at the end of last week, but it rallied pretty strongly, before that on the election. So I do like the US indices to the upside next week, along with the Canadian benchmark we're going to look at in today's video. To the short side, I do like the Kospi primarily and the Nifty. And if I turn on the in-play button, you can see the Russell, the SPX, the Dow Jones, and the TSX. Those are my four favorites to the upside heading into next week. The Kospi and the Nifty to the downside are my two favorite short opportunities. But if I click off the in-play button and we have a look at all the indices here, we can also look at the JSE next week. I do think the JSE to the short side is also something I want to have on my watch list, and we'll be looking at that in today's video as well. Okay, so kicking off with the Russell, you can see this is right at the top of the performance metrics, and we turned extremely overbought on a rolling daily basis on the 11th. That was that day right here. That was where we got the information to say that the Russell needs to pause or correct with a 95% expectancy. And as you can see, if I zoom in here, after we got that data, the very next day, we got the reversal, or we're down about 4%. Now, again, you have to put this into context. Small caps are volatile, and the move into the high was also volatile. So as it currently stands, I still view this as a pullback, as a technical correction. The US dollar and the Japanese yen turning as the best top themes to the long side this week in the weekly Forex forecast yesterday does concern me somewhat over the next, say, 4 to 6 weeks in equities, because Forex tends to lead equities. But specifically for next week, I still favor long positions. You can see the Russell is also approaching, if I zoom out here, the all-time high at the 2458 area, roughly 2459, you could say. So I do think there's a very good chance we take that out. If we do not take out the all-time high and we start to reverse, that sets up a big drop, because a failure to take out the all-time high actually puts the October lows back into play. So going into next week, I still favor long opportunities in the Russell. If we drop down to the 1 hour chart, you can see in the Russell, in small caps, in all probability, we're not going to take out the all-time high next week. It's quite sharp as well, so I wouldn't be surprised to see it getting a little bit corrective. But what I would like to see is the following. I'd like to see the Russell continue lower, take out 2223.23. If we do that, then this is going to turn oversold intra-week. So during the week, we breach the lower bound of this probable range. And very often when that happens, it sets up a snapback for 1 or 2 days reversal. So that's the primary setup I'll be looking at. These are the exact setups I trade in real time with GMT members throughout the week. If for whatever reason we break down and we test the 2142.62, this is where the Russell and small caps become extremely oversold intra-week next week. Now, if we do that, I might already be long here, might be managing a losing position, or if I'm not involved from here for whatever reason, this represents a very good initial opportunity for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside. Now, interestingly, if we were to come all the way down and take out this lower bound, the gold level, that suggests or represents abnormal momentum, and it's a good quantitative way for us to assess a major reversal. So if we do come down and we take out this next week, that would be a major reversal. I'm not expecting it to happen, so I am looking for long opportunities. And the third and final thing you can look for is, as the moving average comes down, look for this to continue lower. Maybe it closes the gap, and then you get the reversal back in the direction we're looking for. So again, you break above the moving average turns up, and what that sets up is it sets up this bull flag setup into the upper bound next week at the 2384.44. Once you get above this level, the 2384.44, you start to run out of runway for the week, and you really only have a 30% chance of going much higher. So any intra-week longs in small caps does set up a good profit-taking opportunity above the 2384.44, but I can either be long or do nothing. I cannot sell this market next week. Next is the S&P 500. Again, I can either be long or do nothing. I cannot sell this indice. So what I'd like to see is, just like small caps, I'd like to see this market turning oversold intra-week. If we come down and we take out the 5730.83, we turn oversold during the week. And it would be great if we could turn oversold and then test this low, because what that's going to do is that's going to set up an opportunity where we're oversold, we test the key area of support, and this market starts to run out of steam, and you get that 1 or 2 day liquidation to the upside. Again, that's what I'm trying to capture, 1 or 2 days worth of movement out of 5 whenever I'm looking at these markets or trading them throughout the week in real time with GMT members. So if we snap back for 1 or 2 days below this level, I'm going to be looking at booking profits on that. If we come all the way down and we take out the 5591.05, although this is unexpected, if it does that, that would again be indicative of a much bigger reversal in the S&P. And in fact, that would set up, it would be the first kind of quantitative sign down here, if we took this out, that we may be reversing. And if we pull back, we could start to look for a right shoulder over here. As it currently stands though, I'm not looking at this as a head and shoulders, I'm looking at this as a bull flag. So if we do breach this, I would be looking for 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside, whether I'm long from here already or not. And I would be considering that as a potential developing head and shoulders. However, I don't anticipate it to do that. So if we do start to make our way down to the lower bound, and very much like the Russell, we start to break back above the moving average, you can look for it to break above, kind of pull back and tuck into the moving average, and that sets up your intra-week bull flag opportunity. The moving average kind of turns, the price hugs the moving average. In this case, I'd be looking at the 6010.40, and I would expect a retest of the prior high in this scenario in the S&P 500. Next is the Dow Jones. The probable range is between the 44,386 and the 42,503. I can only be a buyer of this market or do nothing. I cannot sell it. So I'd like to see this coming all the way down as usual and breaching the lower bound. And that's at the 42,503.32. If we trade below this next week, we start to turn oversold intra-week. The odds of a reversal jump to about 70% for a 1 or 2 day liquidation, in this case to the upside. And if we breach this and take out this high, this would be a great setup. I'd be looking for momentum to fade, so we turn oversold. I start to look at the momentum. I start to look for those reversal patterns, looking for a double bottom or an inverse head and shoulders, and that's what I'm going to be looking at 1 or 2 days to the upside. If we blast through here for whatever reason and we take out the 41561.65, this is where we turn extremely oversold intra-week. This is the second place I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside. Whether I'm long from here and just risk managing this, cost averaging it and trying to scratch it for break even, or whether I'm not long and this ends up just being an initial position, this is the second place I'll look for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside. And the third place you can look for potential opportunity is if we start to make our way down, and instead of taking out the lower bound in this case, you get the break higher, just like the other two US indices we just looked at. That sets up a potential bull flag setup intra-week, and I'd be looking in that case. Right here is where you get the opportunity when it first pulls back in and hugs the moving average. I'll be looking for a potential move up to the 44,386.65. And again, if we do that, I would not be surprised. In fact, I would expect it to take out the prior high. Next is the Canadian benchmark, the TSX. Now, the Canadian dollar is weak going into next week. Crude oil is selling off, and this is putting downward pressure on the Canadian dollar. As the national currency goes down, this is supportive for the benchmark. So I still like long positions only in the TSX, the Canadian benchmark. We started to pull back. So what I'd like to see is I would like to see this come down, breach the 24480, and then we turn oversold intra-week or during the week. And then I'm going to drop down and start to look on the lower time frames for momentum to fade, for reversal patterns to come in, double bottoms, inverse head and shoulders. I'm going to be looking at trading those to the upside for 1 or 2 days. If we blast through here and take out the 2407124, this is the second place I'll be looking for a potential 1 or 2 day reversal, whether I'm already long or not. I may already be long and just risk managing a losing position. If that happens, this will be the second place because we turn extremely oversold intra-week. So below here, we're oversold. Below here, we're extremely oversold. And in this case, again, we would have a breach of the second lower bound. It would be telling us, like an arrow pointing in the direction, we've got abnormal momentum to the downside. And we'd probably be looking at this as a potential double top in that scenario. And then, again, pulling back, looking for a short position over here. But for next week, I can either be long or do nothing. I cannot short it. And finally, look for that break back above the moving average. If you get that, look for the moving average to turn and look for that bull flag setup. That first test, that first hug of the moving average sets up that intra-week bull flag setup into the 25300.39. Next is the NASDAQ. Now, I much prefer the 4 benchmarks we just looked at. But I know a lot of you like the NASDAQ and it's kind of bullish to neutral going into next week. So we'll look at the levels for the NASDAQ as well. If the NASDAQ comes down and takes out the 19691.05, this is where I'd be primarily interested, especially if we test this low, because now we're oversold during the week. So we're below the probable range, which means we have a good chance of snapping back inside the range by the end of the week. But we turn oversold intra-week and we take out a support area. That would be a good place to look for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside. If we come all the way down and take out the 18987.97, we become extremely oversold intra-week. It's expected to happen around 5% of the time. If it does happen, it's usually with a major catalyst and it usually signals a reversal or trend change in that asset. So it's not expected to do that, but if it does, as a plan B, as a backup, that would be the second place, whether I'm long from over here or not and risk managing it, or this is initial position, I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And the third and final thing you can look for next week is if we start to stall out down here, maybe we close this gap, and then during the week, you get the rally back above the moving average, you can look for it to turn, and you can look for that bull flag setup into the 21097.21. And again, in this scenario, I would be aiming for the prior high. Okay, so wrapping up the global indices with the 3 benchmarks, I'm primarily focused on short positions. And again, the luxury of trading equities is we can look for positions to the upside and the downside within the same week. And that tends to mean whether the benchmarks go up or down together, we can get opportunities in that direction. So I'm going to be looking in the Kospi at a potential move back. You can see the prior low over here, nice area of broken support turning resistance. And at the same time above the 24960, this is where we turn overbought intra-week. This is going to be a place I'm going to be looking for momentum to slow for a potential 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. If we blast through here and take out the 2573.00, this is where we would become extremely overbought intra-week. And this is where I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside, whether I'm short already or not. Again, it's not expected to happen. And if it did happen, if we start to trade above the 2573.00, that would be indicative of a trend change. You know, next week we'd be looking for this to pull back, and that would probably be an inverse head and shoulders. So I don't expect that to happen. However, if we do get up there, that would be the second place I'd be looking for a short opportunity in the Kospi. And the third thing, of course, is if we start to break back above the moving average, this kind of stalls out. We break back above the moving average. We don't quite take out the upper bound, and instead we just see this correct, and then you get that momentum sell-off. That's where you can look for that bear flag setup into the lower bound, in this case, at the 2344.87. The fact that the Kospi, the Korean benchmark, is the #1 short theme heading into next week also adds weight to the risk off signal that we're seeing in the Forex markets with the dollar and the Japanese yen starting to outperform together. because the Kospi is a bellwether for global growth, and if it's underperforming because of the exporting nature of South Korea, if it's underperforming, this tends to be a bad sign for the overall health of the global economy as well. So that is also suggestive of risk off, not straight away, but in the near future. Next is the Nifty. I can either be short or do nothing. I cannot buy the Nifty next week. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see this pull back, breach the upper bound here, kind of stair-stepping the prior low as well. But above the 23890.69, this is where we become overbought intra-week. I'll start to look for momentum to fade. If we breach all the way through and take out this low, that would be fantastic, because now we're stair-stepping, trading into the prior low over here, broken support turning resistance. This is where I'd be looking for a potential 1 or 2 day reversal as momentum starts to slow, looking for that kind of head and shoulders double top. If we blast through, as unexpected as it is, and take out 24248.68, especially if we do that and take out this high, that's going to be a great place again to look for those reversal patterns, double top, head and shoulders in this case for a 1 or 2 day reversal. So whether I'm short from here and risk managing that, trying to cost average it and get out for a break even, or if I'm not involved and this is an initial position, that is the second place I'll be looking for a potential short opportunity next week. And the third and final thing is if we start to break back above, in this case, the moving average turns. And then, of course, you know, as it turns up, you get the break back down below, pulls back, and the moving average comes down. It hugs the moving average, and that first test after breaking back below, that gives you that kind of bear flag opportunity, in this case, into the 23174.70, the lower bound of the Nifty next week, and a great profit-taking target for any intra-week shorts. And the final benchmark we're going to look at to the short side is the South African JSE benchmark. And we're breaking down, already we're kind of flagging a little bit. What I would personally like to see is for this to continue higher, to take out the 77593.32. Once we do that, I'm going to drop down. I'm going to start to look on the lower time frames. Are we getting double tops? Are we getting head and shoulders? And if we are, we see momentum fading, looking for that liquidation as the buyers realize, okay, I've made a mistake here, this is not going anywhere. They pull their positions, you get the liquidation. That's the exact setup I'll be looking at trading and also doing in real time with GMT members next week. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. If we blast through, and again, we'd probably need some kind of catalyst, it's not expected, but if we do that, take out this high, you can see there would be a bigger trend change. You can see that kind of abnormal momentum would signal something bigger than just a pullback. So I don't expect it to do that, but if it does do that, whether I'm short or not already from over in this area, this is the second place I'll be looking to pull the trigger for a potential short above the 79413.28. And the third and final thing is, as we start to pull back, you know, you can look for that break back down below the moving average turns, and you get that initial first kind of test of the moving average, and then it sells off. That's the bear flag setup intra-week down to the 73953.39. Okay, so drilling down to the US sectors, because when we're trading equities and we're trading individual stocks, what are we really trying to do? The whole point of trading stocks is to generate alpha, to find stocks which outperform or underperform the sector that they're in. And then, of course, that sector outperforming or underperforming, you know, depending on whether you're long or short, the benchmark indice. So, you know, if the S&P 500 goes up 5%, we want to find the sector that's going to go up 8%, and then within that sector we want to find the stock that's going up 10, 15%, right? That's the goal. So looking at the sectors to the upside, XLY, XLF, these are the two top sectors that I want to be positioning into, either to trade those sectors to the upside or to be drilling down looking at stocks. So we're going to look at two stocks individually today from XLY. We're going to look at two XLF stocks. And to the downside, XLV and XLB are the two sectors that I want to be primarily focused on being short, so the actual sector itself, but also looking at those individual stocks within those sectors. We're going to look at two stocks within XLV, and we're going to look at two stocks within XLB. And don't forget, XLV specifically, we have seen the appointment of RFK Jr. as the head of the HHS in the US, and this is primarily going to affect the vaccine makers within the healthcare sector. So I especially like short opportunities going forwards in the vaccine makers, and we're going to be looking at least one in today's video. Okay, so kicking off the individual stocks, looking first at the XLY consumer discretionary sector. It is Tesla that I like the best to the upside. We started to pull back last week. We didn't get any breakout higher. You can see the correction is starting to move lower and it's continuing. And so coming into this week, I'm going to be looking for a couple of things. If we start to pull back and we break the 297.88, this is where we start to turn oversold intra-week. Wouldn't surprise me if we did that because we had a 40% rally post-election, so it needs to breathe, needs to pause. But any kind of breach of the 297.88, this market turns oversold intra-week. And if we breach the lower bound of its probable range, I'm going to drop down and start to look for inverse head and shoulders, double bottoms, looking for those 1 or 2 day reversals to the upside. If we break all the way down to the 275.05, especially if we do that and we stair step this high, which would be likely if we did breach this level, that would be the second place. Whether I'm long from here already or not, that I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside. And the third and final thing is if you start to break down towards the lower bound, look for that intra-week breakout. So if it's moving down, it's moving down. You know, I'm not looking to jump in between these levels, but you can get that breakout first. The moving average turns up, and that's where you get that kind of bull flag set up intra-week. In this case, the 343.55. But if we did that, it wouldn't surprise me if it went higher and took out this high as a profit-taking target next week. The next stock I like to the upside in the consumer discretionary sector is BKNG, Booking.com. We actually looked at it last week and it moved sideways. Now, as we saw stocks selling off towards the end of last week, Booking.com held firm. It didn't really go down, just moved sideways. So I do like this once again going into this week, although it didn't do much last week. Any continued pullback and a breach of the 481236, this is where I'll be looking. Double bottoms to form, inverse head and shoulders, looking for those reversal patterns for a 1 or 2 day rally back into this range. If we breach this and we test the 4649, 0.54 is where we turn extremely oversold intra-week. It's the second place I'll be looking for a potential long opportunity, whether I'm already long from around here and cost averaging it or whether this is an initial position. That's the second place, and only then, you know, we breach this, I get one shot to buy it somewhere in this area. Unless we take out the second lower bound, I don't get another opportunity to buy it. I have to wait. So if we do that, I'm going to be looking at cost averaging or initial position. And the third thing, as always, very much like with Tesla, if you get that intra-week breakout, because it's consolidating, it's ranging, and then you get the breakout with momentum, and then you get the pullback into the moving average in this case, and look for that bull flag set up. Profit taking target to the upside is if the price trades above the 5138.01. Moving on then to XLF financials, starting with Morgan Stanley. I can either be a buyer or do nothing. I cannot short Morgan Stanley next week. I'd like to see this, as always, come down and turn oversold intra-week. We've got a couple of lows over here. That would be good. We breach these and we take out the lower bound at the same time. This is where I'm going to be looking for reversal patterns, inverse head and shoulders on the lower time frames, on the kind of 5 minute, 15 minute, you know, even 1 minute. When you get to stocks, you can drill down to the 1 minute. I'm going to be looking for that setup next week. If we blast through there and take out the 12340, that means something's gone wrong. That means we've got some kind of catalyst for some reason. This is seeing abnormal volatility. This would be the second place, whether I'm long from around here already or not, that I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And the third thing, as always, and with stocks, these are quite good. You get those intra-week breakouts, it turns, and then you start to hug the moving average and you get that push away. That's the opportunity for the intra-week breakout into the 139.38. Great profit taking target next week to the upside in Morgan Stanley. And the fourth stock we're going to look at to the upside in today's video is Wells Fargo, also in XLF. I would like to see this breaking below its moving average because this means we're getting a correction to start the week. Especially if we breach this and maybe come down, close this gap. That would be a great place to start to look for those double bottoms as soon as we close this, because now we're oversold and we've gap closed. So this is a great place to look for those reversal patterns for a 1 or 2 day reversal. You're not going to take out the lower bound and then take out the upper bound. Very, very, very rarely does that happen. Usually, if you take out the lower bound, you might move, you know, halfway back up. You're not going to move all the way back up to top. You shouldn't expect that. If we blast through, take out the 67.69, this is the second place next week I'll look for a potential long opportunity, whether I'm already long and risk managing a losing position or whether this is an opportunity for an initial position below here. And the third and final thing is the intra-week breakout setup, where instead of taking out the lower bound, it starts to break higher. The moving average follows it. and you just get this tucking into the moving average for the first time, and then it pushes away. Profit taking target to the upside if Wells Fargo trades above the 77.66. Okay, so wrapping up the video with 4 individual stocks I'm going to be looking at to the downside on my watch list. Starting with mRNA, Moderna. It's a vaccine maker, which we've just discussed, has that fundamental bearish catalyst with RFK Jr. becoming the head of the HHS. It's also in the NASDAQ. We've already looked in today's video at the fact that the NASDAQ is underperforming the other benchmark, so that makes it a pretty good short as well if we're looking at the benchmark level. And if we look at the sector level, XLV is the best sector to the short side. So I do like mRNA for potential short opportunities. I can't buy it, I can only sell it. And what I want to see is I want to see mRNA pulling back, trading above the 41.22. If it does that, I'm going to drop down. I'm going to begin to look for bearish reversal patterns, and I'm going to look for a 1 or 2 day liquidation. If it blasts through, whether I'm short from around here already or not, a trade above the 45.60 is the second thing that will make me look for a potential entry opportunity to the short side for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And the third and final thing is we start to break back above the moving average, and instead of taking out the upper bound, we just sell off again. You can look for that bear flag opportunity into the moving average and away down to the lower bound at 32.47. The second healthcare stock we're going to look at is REGN, Regeneron, and again in the NASDAQ, so the most underperforming benchmark, and then in healthcare, the most underperforming sector. So I really like this to the short side. I want to see it pull back and trade above the 792.16. Once it does that, it turns overbought intra-week. So now we're in the zone where we can start to look for reversals. I'm going to be looking, as always, for head and shoulders, double top primarily. These are the setups that I primarily trade. Looking for that 1 or 2 day liquidation if we get that. If we blast all the way through, take out the 827.52 and perhaps this high, whether I'm already short or not from around this area and I'm risk managing a losing position, or I get the opportunity to enter it as an initial position. That's the second place. I'll look for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And the third and final thing is, of course, look for the moving average to come down, starts to make its way back up. But instead of taking out the upper bound, you get the break back down, moving average follows it, and then you get that bear flag set up, in this case, down to the profit taking target of the 721.45. And finishing off then with 2 material stocks, so stocks in XLB. I would like to see Dow Inc. pulling back and breaching the 45.72, ticker DOW. Again, if it does that, this is where I'm going to start to look. Essentially, we're looking at this as a correction, and this as being the end of the correction. So it corrects, it turns overbought above this level, and then the odds swing in my favor or in our favor for this to start to reverse back inside the weekly range. So if that's the case and we get a kind of double top or head and shoulders here, I'm going to be looking at that setup for a 1 or 2 day reversal. If it blasts through, in this case, we'll also be stair-stepping this low. So this would be a good place, again, whether I'm short already and just risk managing it, or if I get the chance to short it for the first time above this level, that's the second place I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And the third thing you can look for, as always, we start to push higher and then we break back down below the moving average. You can look for the bear flag setup back into the moving average, pulls in and pushes away, pulls in, pushes away. Looking for that bear flag setup, in this case, down to the profit taking target, the 42.35. And finally, we have Nuance Corporation, ticker NEM, suffering because of the lower gold price. Any kind of pullback, and we looked at the gold price in yesterday's weekly Forex forecast video, one of the top short themes with a stronger dollar, gold to the downside, silver to the downside. So these kind of gold miners, even silver miners, they're going to likely suffer those ramifications from a weaker commodity price in gold or silver. So any pullback in this market, if we breach the 42.76, this is where I'm going to start to look for a potential reversal. Double top, head and shoulders reversal. I'm looking for that 1 or 2 day capitulation or liquidation to the downside in this case. If we blast through here and take out the 44.60, there's also a gap close right up here. So if we take this out, close this gap, this would be the second place I'd start to look for momentum to fade on lower time frames, look for bearish reversal patterns. And that's the second place. Whether I'm already short or not, I'd be looking for a potential short opportunity next week. And if we pull back and the moving average follows, it follows, it follows, and then we get the breakdown before we take out the upper bound, expect as always the moving average to follow, and then you get that bear flag set up, in this case down to the profit taking target of 39.09. So that is it from me for today, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, why not consider joining us in the GMT training room each day, where I look at the best markets as well as sharing real-time setups that I'm personally looking at trading with members as part of our GMT training program. Don't forget, you can also get a 2-week free trial to the Cutting Edge Hedge Dash trading app used in today's video by heading over to www.hedgedash.com. Access to the Cutting Edge Hedge Dash platform is included with every GMT membership.